Hello everyone, here is Afra Siab. Today we are going to solve Cambridge IGCSE Physics Paper 4 Theory Extended, held on May-June 2018 and paper code is 0625 with variant 42. So let's start from question number 1. Question number 1, Part A. Figure 1.1 shows the axis of a distance time graph for an object moving in a straight line. In figure 1.1 we can see that here is a distance time graph and the distance is measured in meter and it is taken along y-axis while the time is measured in second and it is taken along x-axis. Part 1. First, on figure 1.1 draw time t is equal to 0 and time is equal to 10 seconds, the graph for an object moving with the constant speed of 5 meter per second. Start your graph at distance is equal to 0 meter. So first of all we have to draw the graph when speed of the object is constant. It is 5 meter per second. It is not changing and we have to draw this graph between 0 and 10 seconds. So going back to the graph, first of all here is a distance time graph and we are given that speed is constant. Speed constant means that when we increase the time, body also cover more distance. It means that when time passes, the distance also covers. So if I consider that at time and distance, when time is equal to 1 second, the distance covered by the object will be 5 meter and it is in seconds. Now when time passes and it becomes 2 seconds, so that the distance covered by the object will be 10. When time passes 3 seconds, the distance covered by the object will be 15 and at 10 seconds, the distance covered by the body will be 50. We continue in this way. So first of all, we can see from here that it's a distance time graph and the slope of distance time graph is speed. So when I find out the slope will be equal to S over T and this is also equal to speed. So from this data, first of all, I check out speed that either it remains constant or vary. So I divide distance by time. It is equal to 5. So speed here remains same. I write here speed in meter per second. In second case, it is 10 over 2. It is also equal to 5. And third case, it is 15 over 3, which is also equal to 5. So going in this way, last one is 50 divided by 10 and it is equal to 5. Here you can see that speed remain constant, that is 5 meter per second. So we have to draw these points on the graph. So first point will be 1, 5, 2, 10, 3, 15 and so on. It will be 10 and 50. So first of all, I consider this point when time is equal to 0. And when time t is equal to 1, it is at this point 2 and here is 3, 4, 5, 6 and 7, 8, 9 and this is 9. So I write here 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. So when time equal to 1 second, then distance will be 5. It is given that graph start from distance t is equal to 0 and distance s is equal to 0. So first point is basically 0, 0 and it is this point. Second one, when time t is equal to 2 seconds, distance is 10. So that here it is 2 seconds and distance will be 10 at this point. And first one point is when time t is equal to 1 second, distance is 5. So it will be at this point. And now we see the last one point, that time is equal to 10 and distance is equal to 50. So at this point, time is 10 and distance will be 50 at this point. So we have to draw a straight line and to join all of these points. So I will draw a straight line here. So this line is basically the constant speed of 5 meters per second, and we have to draw this on a distance time graph. So going towards the other part, state the property of the graph that represent speed. So we know that it's a speed. So we know that it's a distance time graph and the slope of distance time graph is equal to speed. So I just write here speed is equal to slope of distance time graph, and it is s over t, where s is distance and time is t. So I write here it's a gradient or slope. Next part 2, between time 10 second and time 20 second, the object accelerates. So from 10 second to 20 second, the object accelerates. The speed at time 20 second is 9 meters per second. It is given that when time t is equal to 20 second, the speed is 9 meters per second. Calculate the average acceleration between time is equal to 10 second and time t is equal to 20 second. Here we have to find out the acceleration, and we know that acceleration is equal to change in velocity over change in time. So here, first of all, I write here when time t1 is equal to 10 second and second time t2 is equal to 20 second, v1 and v2. When time t is equal to 10 second, the speed is 5 meters per second, because here we can see that here is a constant speed, that is 5 meters per second from 0 to 10 second. It means that 10 second, the speed is 5. It is 5 meters per second. And at t is equal to 20 second, speed becomes 9. It will be 9 meters per second, and we have to find out the acceleration. I write here v2 minus v1 over t2 minus t1. So putting values 9.0 minus 5.0 divided by 20 minus 10, and it will be equal to 4 over 10. So that the value of acceleration comes to be 0.40 meter per second square. Acceleration is measured in meter per second square. So I write here acceleration is equal to 0.40 meter per second square. Part B. Figure 1.2 shows the axis of speed time graph for different objects. So here is a figure 1.2 and we can see that it's a speed time graph, and speed is measured in meter per second while the time is measured in second. Part 1. The object has an initial speed of 50 meters per second. Initial speed is given and decelerates uniformly at 0.35 meter per second square for 100 seconds. So first of all, initial speed is 50 meter per second, and then body decelerate at the rate of 0.35 meter per second square up to 100 seconds. On figure 1.2, draw the graph to represent the motion of the object. So first of all, initial speed is 50, that is at this point, and we don't know the value of final speed because we have to find out the value of final speed. It's a speed time graph. For that, here acceleration is given and time is also given. So using formula that acceleration is equal to delta v over delta t, we find out the value of v. It will be equal to a and delta t. So acceleration here is 0.35 multiplied by time is 100. So that velocity comes to be 15 meter per second. So this is a velocity, and we are given that it decelerates uniformly at this rate for 100 seconds, but its initial speed is 50. So we have to find out the final speed by subtracting 50 minus its 35. Now I subtract 50 minus 35 and the final velocity comes to be 15 meter per second. It is the final velocity and initial velocity is given. So we have to find out the point where 15 meter per second lies. It will be at this point. So it is 15 meter per second and it is given that body decelerates. It means that when we increase the time, the speed of body decreasing. So we can see that it's a straight line that shows deceleration. Now joining these 2 points, so this is the graph. Part 2. Calculate the distance travelled by the object from time equal to 0 and time equal to 100 seconds. Here we have to find out the distance that is travelled by the object from 0 to 100 seconds. On this graph, we can see that time starts from 0 second and it ends at 100 seconds, and we have to find out the area or distance travelled by the body. Distance travelled by the body is actually equal to the area under this graph, and in order to calculate the area, we first of all divide this into 2 portions because it's not a regular shape. So that when I divide, both of these portions, it will be this. The upper portion I shade it as region 1 while the lower portion is 2. Now I'm going to shade this portion. This is region 1 while below here is a region 2. So we have to find out the area. Region 1 is basically a triangle and 2 is basically a rectangle. When we have to find out area, the area of triangle will be half base multiplied by height. Here base is 100, that is time, multiply it with speed, that is 50 minus 15. It will be 1 over 235. So we also have to calculate the area of region 2. It's a rectangle and its area will be 100 multiplied by 15. 100 seconds and 15 meter per second. So I am going to write here distance travelled by object is equal to area under graph. I write here area 1 plus area 2. So area 1 is basically a triangle, and I write here it is equal to 1 over 2 multiplied by 100 and 35 plus area 2 is 100 multiplied by 15. So it comes to be 1750 plus 1500, which is equal to 3250, and distance is measured in meter and it is approximately equal to 3300 meter. I write here 3300 meter. So this is the distance or the area under speed time graph, which is equal to the distance traveled by the object. Question number 2. Figure 2.1 shows a hollow metal cylinder containing air floating in the sea. So here is a metal cylinder that contains air inside it. It is floating on a sea. Part A. The density of the metal used to make the cylinder is greater than the density of seawater. It is given that the density of metal is greater than the density of seawater. Explain why the cylinder floats. So we have to explain that why the cylinder float. So first of all, we can see here that metal cylinder also contains air, so that we compare the total density of the metal cylinder and air with the density of seawater. So I write here density of cylinder plus air. If it is less than the density of sea or seawater, then cylinder will float. Other condition is that if the density of cylinder plus air is greater than density of seawater, then it will sink. In our case, the density of metal that is used to make the cylinder, it is greater than density of seawater. So we can say that the density of cylinder and air is less than the density of seawater. That's why it will float. So I write here the cylinder float because the total density of cylinder is less than the density of seawater. So that's why the cylinder floats. Part B. The cylinder has a length of 1.8 meter. It is the length of cylinder. It floats with 1.2 meters submerged in the sea. The bottom of the cylinder has a cross-section area of 0.80 meters square. The density of sea water is 1020 kg per meter cube. Calculate the force exerted on the bottom of the cylinder due to the depth in the sea water. So here we have to find out the total force that is exerted on the bottom of cylinder. So first of all, here we know that force will be equal to the weight of the displaced water. So I write here force will be equal to weight of displaced water, and it will be equal to rho V and G, because we know that pressure here is equal to rho GH and pressure is force per unit area. It will be equal to rho GH. So force will be equal to rho GH multiplied by area, and height and area combines to gives volume. Or we can see here that force will be equal to rho A, H and G. G is acceleration due to gravity. So putting the values, the density is given, that is 1020, multiply. The area is 0.20 meter square. So it is 0.80 meter square, multiply by height is given, that is 1.2 meter. Multiply by the value of G is 10 meter per second square. So the force comes to be 9800 Newton. So this is the value of force. I write here 9800 Newton. Part C. Deduce the weight of the cylinder. Explain your answer. Here we say that the force will be equal to the weight of displaced water. It means that force is equal to weight. So here we calculate the force. So the weight also be equal to 9800 Newton. It is because if I consider its object, and we know that weight is always acting in downward direction and this force will be acting in upward direction. And here it is 9800 and it is also 9800 Newton. So both of these are equal and opposite direction and both of them cancels each other and the resultant force is equal to 0. So I write here resultant force is equal to 0 because upward and downward forces are equal. Question number 3. Figure 3.1 shows an aircraft on the deck of an aircraft carrier. The aircraft accelerates from rest. It means that initial velocity is equal to 0, that is represented by u is equal to 0 along the deck. At takeoff, the aircraft has a speed of 75 meter per second and this is the final speed. V is equal to 75 meter per second. The mass of the aircraft is 9500 kg. So the mass of the aircraft is 9500 kg. Part A. Calculate the kinetic energy of the aircraft at takeoff. So here we have to find out the value of kinetic energy of the aircraft at takeoff. We know that kinetic energy is equal to half mv square. Kinetic energy of a body is associated with its motion, and as the aircraft is moving, that's why it possesses kinetic energy and its value is half mv square, where m is a mass and v is speed. So it will be equal to 1 over 2. Mass is 9500 multiply by speed is 75 meter per second, because we have to find out the kinetic energy at takeoff. So it will be 75 square. So that the value of kinetic energy comes to be 2.7 into 10 की power 7 joule. So the kinetic energy will be equal to 2.7 into 10 की power 7 joule. Part B. On an aircraft carrier, a catapult provides an accelerating force on the aircraft. The catapult provides a constant force of distance 150 meter along the deck. Calculate the resultant force on the aircraft as it accelerates. Assume that all of the kinetic energy at the takeoff is from the work done on the aircraft by the catapult. So here we assume that all of the kinetic energy comes from the work done on the aircraft. And we have to find out the total resultant force. So according to second law of Newton, F is equal to ma. Force is the product of mass and acceleration. Here mass is given, that is 9500 kg, and we don't know the value of acceleration, but here some data is given. Like distance is given, it is 150 meter and initial speed is 0. Final speed is 75. It is given here 75. And we have to find out the resultant force. So using V square is equal to U square minus plus 2AS. This is the third equation of motion. From here we have to find out the value of acceleration. So acceleration will be equal to V square minus U square over 2S. It will be equal to A. That is acceleration. V is finally lost. It is given 75. Its square minus 0 divided by 2, and distance is measured in meters. It is equal to 150 meter. So the value of acceleration comes to be 18.75 meter per second square. So we have found out the acceleration and mass is already given. So force becomes as 9500 multiplied by 18.75, and it is equal to 1781.25 Newton, and I write it as 18 Newton. It is also equal to 1.8 into 10 की power 5 Newton. So I write here force is equal to 1.8 into 10 की power 5 Newton. So this is the value of the resultant force on the aircraft as it accelerates. Question number 4, part A. Figure 4.1 represents an atom. There is a figure 4.1 and there is a single atom. Representing atom by circles approximately the same size as in figure 4.1. Sketch part 1. On figure 4.2, the arrangement of atom in a crystalline solid. So here we have to sketch the arrangement of atom in solid. We know that in solid, molecules are very close to each other and there is no spacing between their molecules. So when we draw the structure of solid, it will be just like this. The atoms are very close to each other. So these are the arrangement of atom in a crystalline solid. Part 2. On figure 4.3, the arrangement of atom in a gas. And we know that in gas the molecules are very further apart from each other and the distance between them is very large. So it will be like this. If one atom is at this place, second one will be at this, and third one will be just like this. These are the atoms in gas. Part B. First, describe the motion of atom in a solid. So we can see in figure 4.2 that atoms are very close to each other and the spacing between them is very small. So we can simply say that the atoms in solid vibrate about a fixed position. So I write here vibrate about fixed position. Part 2. A sculptor makes a statue from a block of crystalline rock using a cutting tool. Explain why he must apply a large force to be tool to remove a small piece of rock. So there is a crystalline rock and he uses a large force to remove a small piece of rock. So in a crystalline rock, the molecules are arranged in a regular pattern and the attractive forces between them are very strong. In order to break a small piece of rock, it is necessary to overcome these forces, and to overcome these forces, he must apply a large force. So I write here, force applied must be large enough to overcome forces between molecules. Part 3. A helium-filled balloon in a room of a house suddenly burst. State and explain in terms of atoms what happened to the helium from the balloon after balloon has burst. So when we know that helium is filled inside the balloon, and when balloon is burst, then the helium comes out and it diffuses because it collide with the air molecules. So it will spread and diffuse in all possible direction. So I write here helium atom collide with air molecules and diffuse in all directions. Question number 5. A student wants to investigate good and bad absorbers of thermal radiation. She has the apparatus shown in figure 5.1, a supply of cold water and a meter rule. So here is the figure 5.1. We can see that here is a small polished can and other is small black painted can. So first one is polished can while the other one is black can. There are two thermometers and also an electric heater. Explain how the student could use the apparatus she has available to carry out her investigation. Describe the result she would expect to obtain. Draw a diagram of the setup. So first of all, which steps we have to do? There are two can. One is polished while the other is black can. First of all, we place these thermometer in both of these cans one by one, and then electric heater in between both of these cans at equal distance from them. And then we have to turn on the electric heater and note the temperature change. And we will see that the temperature change will be larger for the black can as compared to polished can. So first of all, I draw a setup here. So first of all, these are two cans, and then we have to place the thermometer inside both of these cans. Now I am going to place here thermometer. I write here it's a polished can. And this one is black can. So we have to place heater in between both of these. So I am going to draw this. Heater will be placed at this position, equal distance from both of these. So this is heater. And it is from equal distance from both of these. So we will see that the temperature change for the black can will be larger as compared to polished can because black can is a good absorber. So I write here, place can at equal distance from heater. Fill cans with same amount of water. Put thermometer at same positions. In cans that are filled with water. Turn on heater. For some time. I suppose that we have turned on the heater for 5 minutes. And then measure the temperature change. We will see that or we will observe that higher temperature change in black as black is better absorber. So this is the complete setup, and I also write main points. And there are some water inside this can. Question number 6, part A. Circle 2 of the following that apply to an ultrasound wave traveling in air. Frequency 3.5 Hz, frequency 350 Hz, and frequency 35,000 Hz, longitudinal wave or transverse wave. Speed is 1.5 meter per second and 1.5 into 10 to the power 3 meter per second. And last option, that speed is equal to 1.5 into 10 to the power 6 meter per second. So first of all, ultrasound waves are longitudinal because in this wave, particle move parallel to the direction of propagation of wave. So here first option is longitudinal. Second, we talk about frequency. Ultrasound waves are intermediate frequency. Its frequency is not too much low or too much high. So second one, its frequency is 35,000 Hz. I will draw a circle around 35,000 Hz because 35, 350 and 3.5 Hz frequency is very small. So ultrasound wave has frequency 35,000 Hz. Part B. Calculate the wavelength in a vacuum of X-rays of frequency 1.3 into 10 to the power 7. So the X-rays are traveling in the vacuum and they move with the speed of light. And here we have to find out the value of wavelength. I write here frequency is equal to 1.3 into 10 की power 17 Hz, while speed is speed of light, that is 3 into 10 की power 8 meter per second. Using the relation V is equal to F lambda, here we have to find out the value of lambda. It will be equal to V over F. So V will be 3 into 10 की power 8 divided by 1.3 into 10 की power 17. So that the value of wavelength comes to be 2.3 into 10 की power minus 9 meter. So I write here wavelength is equal to 2.3 into 10 की power minus 9 meters. Part C. A dentist take an X-ray photograph of patient's teeth. Explain why it is safe for the patient to be close to the source of X-ray, but the dentist must stand away from the source. It is because that total dose on the dentist could be much higher over time. And the second one is that dentist is exposed to X-rays often. So I write here dentist is exposed to X-ray often and total dose on dentist could be much higher over time. Part D. State with reason why microwave ovens are designed only to work with the door closed. Because microwaves are harmful to humans and they could easily pass through the open door of the microwave oven, so that the microwave ovens are designed only to work with the door closed. I write here microwaves are harmful to humans they could easily pass through open door of the microwave oven. That's why microwave ovens are designed to work only when the door is closed. Question number 7, Part A. Figure 7.1 shows a ray of light in water that is incident on a submerged transparent plastic block. So here is a figure 7.1 and there are two medium. First of all there is water and second one is plastic. So a ray of light coming from water is incident on the plastic boundary and enters into the plastic. State what happens to the speed of light as it enters the plastic block. Explain your answer. So what happened to the speed of light when it enters into the plastic block? So going back to the figure, we can see that here is a water and plastic block. These are two medium and plastic block is denser as compared to water. I write here it's denser and it's rare. It means that water has less density as compared to plastic. So when a ray of light from water enters into the plastic, then this ray will bend towards the normal. So first of all, I draw a normal ray. First of all, I draw here a normal ray. So it is the normal ray. We can see here that it's the angle of incidence and its angle of refraction. Angle of incidence is larger than angle of refraction, which means that when a ray of light enters into the plastic, it will bend towards the normal. It means that when it bends towards the normal, its speed decreases. So I write here, speed of light decrease as light bends towards the normal. Part B. Figure 7.2 shows the two principal focuses f1 and f2 on a thin converging lens. So here is the figure 7.2 and there are 2 points, that is f1, that is one principal focus, and f2, that is other principal focus, and there is a converging lens. This lens is used to converge the rays at a single point. And there is also scaling that one small box is equal to 1 centimeter. Figure 7.2 also shows an object O of height 1.2 cm placed close to the lens. Two rays from the tip of the object O are incident on the lens. So here we can see that here is the object whose height is 1.2 cm and it is placed inside the principal focus, and two rays are emerging from this object. Part 1. On figure 7.2, continue the path of these two rays for the further distance of at least 5 cm. So we have to draw the path of these two rays for at least 5 cm distance. So here we can see that if I say it's a ray 1 and it's ray 2, ray 1, first of all, it is parallel to the principal axis, and then after refraction by the lens, it passes through the principal focus. So I am going to draw this ray. So this is the path of first ray. Now we can see here is also a second ray that is passing through the center of this lens, and it goes undeviated. It passes straight forward. So I also draw its path. So it's the path of second ray. Now we can see here that both of these rays does not meet at a single point. So these are the two rays that we extend at least 5 cm distance. Part 2. Using your answer B, part 1, find and mark on figure 7.2 the image I of object O and label this image. So first of all, here we can see that this rays does not meet at a single point. It means that there is no image formation. So we can form the image by extending backward these rays. So I am going to draw. I extend these rays in backward direction. and the point where these two rays meet is actually the position of image. So at this point both of these rays meet. So at this position image is formed. I am going to draw the position of this image. And I am going to label it with I. Part 3. Determine the height of image I. We also have to find out the height of this image. So using this scale that one small box is equal to 1.0 centimeter. So here it is 1.0 centimeter. It is also 1.0 centimeter. At this point it is almost 2.8. So the height of image is 2.8 centimeter. I write here 2.8 centimeter. Part 4. State and explain whether I is real image or virtual image. So here we have to describe that either the image that is formed by the thin converging lens, it is real or virtual. So going back to the figure, we can see here that rays does not meet at a point. We extend them in backward direction and then they form the image. It means that the image cannot be projected on a screen. So this image is virtual. So I write here virtual because it cannot projected. Question number 8. Figure 8.1 shows the circuit that contains a battery of electromotive force EMF 6.0 volt. An ammeter. Ammeter is a device that is used to measure current. I write here used to measure current. A 20 ohm resistor and component X. Here is a figure 8.1 and we can see that there is a battery whose EMF is 6.0 volt and there is also the ammeter. It is used to measure the current, and there is also a resistor whose resistance is 20 ohms and also one component involved whose name is unknown. It is labeled with X. Part A. First, state the name of component X. Here we have to tell the name of component X. So this component is basically the variable resistor. I write here variable resistor. Part 2. Potential difference across 20 ohm resistor is measured with voltmeter. So voltmeter is a device that is used to measure the potential difference. On figure 8.1, draw the symbol for this voltmeter connected to circuit. So here we have to draw the symbol for voltmeter. It's 20 ohm resistor and voltmeter is used to measure the potential difference across 20 ohm resistor that is given in the question. And we know that voltmeter is always connected in parallel. So I am going to draw the voltmeter here. So this voltmeter is used to measure the potential difference across 20 ohm resistor because it is connected across 20 ohm resistor. Part B. The potential difference across 20 ohm resistor is varied from 0 to 6 volt. First of all, potential difference is 0 and then it increased and it becomes 6 volt. For each value of potential difference, a corresponding current is measured. So here we have to find out the corresponding current. On figure 8.2, draw a line to indicate how the current measured by the ammeter depends upon the potential difference across 20 ohm resistor. Here resistance is given, that is 20 ohm, and first of all we have to find out the value of current. I write here resistance is equal to 20 ohm. First of all potential is 0 volt, and then if I write it V1, then after potential is 6.0 volt. We have to find out their corresponding values of current, and by using Ohm's law, V is equal to IR and I will be equal to V over R. It means that I1 is equal to V1 over R, and V1 here is 0 volt, so it will be 0 over 20. So the value of current comes to be 0 ampere. Value of I2 will be V2 over R. V2 is 6.0 divided by resistance is 20. So that the value of current comes to be 0.30 ampere. So in this figure we can see here is a current potential difference graph. Current is measured in ampere while the potential difference is measured in volt. So going back, and here we make a point that when potential difference is 0 volt, current is also 0 ampere. Second point is when potential difference is 6 volt, current is 0.30 ampere. So using these 2 points, we draw a graph. So first point is 0, 0, and second one is 6.0 and 0.30. 0, 0 point lies at this position, while 6 volt is this, and its corresponding current is 0.30, which is at this point. So we have to join both of these points and it will be a straight line. So I am going to draw this. So we can see here that it is a straight line. Next part C. A second resistor is connected into circuit in parallel with 20 ohm resistor. State how the combined resistor of two resistors in parallel compares with the resistance of each of the resistor in its own. So first of all, here is the resistance 20 ohm, that is original resistance. Then we attach another resistance whose resistance is also 20 ohms. So we have to find out their equivalent resistor. Both of these are connected in parallel. So when we have to find out their equivalent resistor, it will be 1 over Re is equal to 1 over R1 plus 1 over R2. R1 is original resistance while R2 is second resistance. So it is 1 over 20 plus 1 over 20. It is 20, 1 plus 1, which is 2 over 20. so that the value of Re comes to be 20/2, that is 10 ohms. So here we can see that this 10 ohm is very small as compared to 20 ohm. So when we combine the resistor in parallel combination, then their combined resistance will be smaller than the smallest resistance. So I write here combined resistance will be smaller than the smallest resistor. Part 2. The potential difference across the two parallel resistors is changed and current in the battery for each value of potential difference is measured. A second line could be drawn on figure 8.2 to indicate how the current measured by the ammeter depend upon the potential difference across the two resistors in parallel. State how the second line differs from the original line. You are not expected to draw this second line. So first of all, when both of these resistors are connected in parallel, then their combined resistance will be smaller, which means that when I decrease the resistance according to Ohm's law, when I decrease the resistance, current increases. It means that there will be a line for this resistance which is steeper gradient. So I write here second line will have steeper gradient because its resistance is very small as compared to original. Write here steeper gradient. Question number 9, part A. Figure 9.1 shows a coil ABCD with two turns. The coil is in magnetic field. Here is a figure 9.1 and we can say that there is a magnetic field that is provided by the north and south pole. And there is also a coil ABCD that is placed inside the magnetic field and this coil has two turns. When there is a current in the coil experiences a turning effect. So when a current passing through this coil, there will also be the turning effect. Part 1. Explain why there is a turning effect. So when current passing through this coil, if I consider that current passes in this direction, so magnetic field is from north to south and current on AB side is in upward direction, while on CD side the current is in downward direction. So using the Fleming left hand rule, I write here according to this rule, if I arrange my left hand in such a way that forefinger, middle finger and thumb are mutually perpendicular to each other and I point out my middle finger in the direction of current while the forefinger in the direction of magnetic field, then my thumb will indicate the direction of force. So I will write here thumb will be in the direction of force when middle finger it is in the direction of current and forefinger in the direction of magnetic field. So I draw here a line to separate both of these ends. So on left side and here it is right side. On left side we can see that the magnetic field is from north to south pole while the current is flowing in upward direction. So when I apply the Fleming left hand rule, I see that the force on left hand side will be in upward direction. So it will be in this direction. On the right side, just the direction of current is in downward, in CD side. But the north and south pole means that the magnetic field direction remains same. So when we find out here force using the Fleming left hand rule, it will be in this direction. So both of these forces are in opposite direction, so they forms the turning effect. I write here, as one side of coil is pushed up, and other side of coil is pushed down, so that turning effect produced there. I write here I dot E, side AB is pushed up and side CD pushed down. Part 2. The value of the current is 3 ampere. So first of all, value of current is 3 ampere. Place one tick in each column of table to indicate how the turning effect changes with the change described. So in the first column there are the values of turning effect. In second column the number of turns are changed. In third column current change, while the last column is associated with the change in magnetic field. So first of all, number of turns on coil increased by 6. Originally there are 2 number of coils and now it is increased by 6. So I divide 6 by 2. So there will be 3 number of turns. It means that number of turns increased by 3 times, so that the turning effect also be increased by the factor of 3. So I will take here that turning effect increased by the factor of 3. Current increased to 9 ampere. First of all, it is given that current is 3 ampere and then it increases and it becomes 9 ampere. So it will be 9 by 3, that is equal to 3. It means that when we increase the current, then the turning effect also increase, and here in this case turning effect increased by the factor of 3. So I take here the turning effect increased by the factor of 3. Last one column is the strength of magnetic field is decreased by a factor of 2. So here the magnetic field strength is decreased, which means that turning effect also decrease. So it decreased by the factor of 2, so that turning effect is also decreased by the factor of 2. Part B. Figure 9.2 shows a magnet held just below a vertical coil connected to a galvanometer. So here is a figure 9.2, there is a coil and there is also a magnet that is just below the coil. The magnet is released. Part 1. State an effect on the galvanometer. So first of all, in this figure we can see that the coil is very close to magnet. When magnet is released, then magnet moves in downward direction, so that if this is north pole, the face of this coil will become south because the magnet is moving in downward direction. So when the magnet is moved in downward direction means that here flux decreasing, so that the current also decrease. So galvanometer first of all shows that current is decreasing and then it becomes equal to 0. So I write here it will deflect and then returns to 0. Part 2. State any effect on the magnetic field produced by the coil. So when this magnet is moving in downward direction and it has two poles, one is north and second one is south. This pole is north. It means that when the magnet is moving in the direction, it is moving away from the coil. So coil will try to oppose its motion so that this face becomes south pole in such a way that north and south pole attract each other. So this coil produces a magnetic field to oppose the motion of the magnet. I write here coil produces magnetic field to oppose the motion of magnet. Question number 10, part A. An uncharged conducting metal plate rests on insulating spot. Figure 10.1 shows the plate and a positively charged insulating plastic sheet placed on the top of the metal plate. So first of all, here is a metal plate that is placed on the insulating spot, and we also place a plastic sheet which has positively charged above the metal plate. Part 1. Describe any flow of charge that take place when a plastic sheet is placed onto the metal plate. So in figure 10.1 we can see that these are positively charged and metal plate has negative charge. Because in metals there are free electrons, which means that metal plate has negative charge and both of these charges are opposite kind, due to which positive and negative charges attract each other, or we can simply say that the negative charges in the metal move towards the plastic sheet. So I write here negative charges in metal move towards the plastic sheet because plastic sheet is positively charged. Part 2. On figure 10.1 draw how charges are now arranged within the metal plate. So when the negative charges from the metal plate are attracted towards the positive charges of plastic sheet, then after that how the charges are arranged in a metal plate. So first of all I remove this. We can see from here that plastic sheet is positively charged, so there will be negatively charged because negative charge of the metal plate is attracted towards the positive charge of the plastic sheet, so that there will also be the positive charge below this. Part 3. State and explain if this arrangement of charges help to keep the plastic sheet in place. Yes, this arrangement will help the charges to keep the plastic sheet in place because the opposite charges attract each other. So I write here, this will help to keep the plastic sheet in place as opposite charges attract each other. Going towards the next part. Part B. Figure 10.2 shows two uncharged conducting spheres suspended on insulating thread. So in figure 10.2 there are two spheres and these are uncharged conducting sphere and both of these are suspended on the insulating thread. Part 1. The spheres are now both given positive charges. On figure 10.2, draw a possible position of each sphere and thread. So first of all, both of these spheres are uncharged and in figure 10.1, the original position of the spheres are shown. Now the spheres are given positively charged to both of the sphere, and if I consider that it's a sphere 1 and it's sphere 2 and both of them are given positive charges, we can see both of these are same charges. So both of these repel each other and they move away from each other. So in this way they move away from each other because the same charges repel each other. We use the same concept here. So I draw here, first of all, it's a thread. And I draw a sphere here. Now it has positive charges. This is the position of this sphere. Now I am going to draw the second one. The second sphere also be pulled. So it also have positive charge. It means that when positive charge is given to both of these spheres, they will repel each other and they will move further apart from each other because of the repulsion between them. Part 2. Explain the position you have drawn. So this position we have drawn on the concept that like charges repel each other. I write here, like charges repel each other. Question number 11, part A. A radioactive nucleus of uranium-235 decays to nucleus of thorium and emits an alpha particle. Complete the equation. So here is the uranium whose atomic number is 92 and mass number is 235. It decays into thorium whose atomic number and atomic mass are unknown, and there is also the emission of alpha particle. So to complete this equation, first of all we balance atomic number and atomic mass on both sides of this arrow. I write here first of all atomic number. I suppose it X and it is Y. So on left hand side atomic number is 92. On right hand side it is X plus 2. Because alpha has 2 atomic number and thorium nucleus has X atomic number. I label it just it's a supposition. And here we have to find out the value of X. It will be 92 minus 2, which is equal to 90. It means that the atomic number of thorium is 90. Now we find out the mass number. On the left hand side of arrow there is 235. It will be equal to Y plus 4. So that Y comes to be 235 minus 4, which is equal to 231. So I write here the values of X and Y, that is atomic number 90 and mass number is 231. Now we check that atomic number and atomic mass on both sides of this arrow is equal. Part B. A nucleus of uranium-235 undergoes nuclear fission in a reactor. Part 1. State what is meant by nuclear fission. Here we have to define what is meant by nuclear fission. So splitting of a nucleus into smaller nuclei is known as nuclear fission. So I write here heavy nucleus splitting to form smaller nuclei. Part 2. Suggest why a nuclear reactor is surrounded by thick concrete walls. So here is a concrete walls, and this wall help to absorb the dangerous radiation that is emitted from the nuclear reactor when nucleus split into its part. So I write here concrete helps to absorb dangerous radiation from nuclear reactor that is released when nuclei split. Part 3. State one environmental advantage and one environmental disadvantage of using a fission reactor. To generate electrical energy in power station. So here we have to describe one advantage and one disadvantage of using the fission reactor, and it is used to generate the electrical energy. So the advantage is that there will be no production of CO2, that is carbon dioxide, and disadvantage is that long-term danger from nuclear waste. So I write here advantage, no carbon dioxide produced, and disadvantage, long term danger from nuclear waste. Part C. The thorium produced by decay in Part A is also radioactive. Radioactive means it is unstable and radiation is emitted by this element and has a half-life of 26 hours. At a certain time, a pure sample of this isotope initially contains 4.8 into 10 to the power 9 atoms. Calculate the number of atoms of this sample that decay into following 52 hours. So first of all, decay time is given 52 hours and half-life of thorium is 26 hours. First of all, we have to find out the total number of half-lives. So I write here total number of half-life. I represent it with n. It will be equal to total time divided by half-life. So here total time is 52 hours and half-life is 26. So that there are total 2 number of half-lives. So the initial amount is 4.8 into 10 to the power 9 atoms. So when one half-life passes, half of this atom will decay. When next half-life passes, then half of the atom also decay. So I write here original amount is equal to 4.8 into 10 to the power 19 atoms. Now I calculate it after first half-life. This will be 4.8 multiplied by 10 to the power, it's 9, not 19. Divided by 2. After first half-life, half of the sample will decay, so it becomes 2.4 into 10 to the power 9 atoms. After second half-life, it will be 2.4 into 10 to the power 9 divided by 2. So it comes to be 1.2 into 10 to the power 9 atoms. It means that after 2 half-life, 1.2 into 10 to the power 9 atoms left undecayed. And here we have to find out the number of atoms that decays in 52 hours. So when we have to find out the number of atom decays, it will be equal to original amount minus the total number of atom undecayed. So I write here amount decay will be equal to amount at start minus amount left, and this amount left undecayed. So it will be equal to 4.8 into 10 to the power 9 minus 1.2 into 10 to the power 9. It will be 3.6 into 10 to the power 9 nuclei. So number will be equal to 3.6 into 10 की power 9 nuclei.